Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're just going to give it a few moments so people can start to join on this afternoon. Thanks all for joining us this afternoon for a webinar on building codes. So we're just going to give it a few more minutes. I see that people are still trickling in from the waiting room. So just bear with us for another minute or so, and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like things are starting to level off. So we will get started and hopefully folks will continue to trickle in. And I just want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for a webinar about Maine's new building codes and what communities need to know about these codes and where to find more information. My name is Molly Siegel. I am a Buildings and Lead by Example Policy Advisor at GOPIF, which is the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. I'm going to be hosting this webinar today with some experts who are here to tell you more about the new codes. So just a reminder, you may already know that Maine's new energy and building codes went into effect on April 7th of this year, leading to energy savings while also improving health and safety in new residential and commercial construction. And this webinar is really meant to provide information about the updated codes. It's a very, very brief overview. There's lots and lots more details. We'll tell you how to attend trainings that will go much deeper into all of the codes. And this webinar is really just meant to provide information to ensure that homeowners, code enforcement officers, builders, and other professionals are aware of some of the changes and where to find more detailed information. So today's agenda, we will hear from Ross Anthony, Buildings and Energy Efficiency Analyst at the Governor's Energy Office. We'll also hear from Greg Gilbert, who's the Maine State Building Official, about what is in the new codes, how to prepare for them, and how you can learn more. And we will do some questions and answers as well. Just a reminder here, the webinar is being recorded and we will post it online. After the webinar, we'll also post the slides for your reference on the link up here on the slide. There is a question and answer box available to you. So we did get a lot of great questions through the online form before the webinar. However, you could also use the Q&A box to submit questions in real time. We will start by taking the online questions when we get to the Q&A section, and we'll also reserve a few minutes for live questions. So we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. There's a lot of great questions, so thank you for submitting those. And then finally, you can find fact sheets, a list of upcoming trainings on the codes, and then actually some really great recordings of past trainings, all in the Fire Marshal's office website. The link is up on the slide. Again, you'll be able to access the link after the webinar. So before I kick it over to Ross, I just wanted to give folks a reminder of how codes are recommended in Maine's Climate Action Plan, Maine Won't Wait. So one of the recommendations in Maine Won't Wait, this is our 4-year state plan for climate action that was published just this past November, recommends establishing strong systems to support rapid adoption and compliance with increasingly climate-friendly building codes and standards. And some of the actions included in the plan are adopting, committing to adoption and training to reach net zero emission building codes by 2035, transferring building code responsibilities to the Maine Office of Community Affairs, and finally, but most relevant to this webinar and very importantly, providing training and support for contractors in code enforcement, particularly focusing on small and rural communities. So just a reminder of how these codes and the support that goes along with them are supported by Maine's Climate Action Plan. And this is what we are trying to do right now, is to help folks understand the codes and where they can learn more. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ross Anthony from the Governor's Energy Office for an introduction to the code's statutory requirements and why codes are important. So you can take it away, Ross, and I will advance the slides for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Molly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ross Anthony, and I am the Buildings and Energy Efficiency Analyst with the Maine Governor's Energy Office. As Molly said, my job today is to provide a quick overview of MUBEC, some of the statutory requirements surrounding building codes in Maine, and also just generally what codes are and why they are important. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the Governor's Energy Office to kick things off. We sit within the executive department and are directly responsible to the governor on a wide range of various energy activities. We're responsible for several activities such as providing policy leadership, technical assistance, developing energy programs, monitoring energy markets, and reporting on heating fuel and energy prices. GEO also works very closely with other state agencies, as well as local and federal officials and folks within the industry, nonprofit, and academia on energy issues. Next slide, Molly. So just wanted to highlight the key agencies that have been really focused on building codes, especially in the past couple of months, if not years, frankly. First and foremost, we have the Office of the State Fire Marshal. This office sits within the Department of Public Safety. Greg is a part of that office and can speak more to the office when he is up. We also have the Maine Office of Community Affairs, also called MOCA. This will be where building codes will eventually live. They currently live in the Office of the State Fire Marshal, but it is anticipated in the fall of this year that those codes will be transitioned to MOCA. MOCA is a new standalone state office that partners with Maine communities to strengthen planning and implementation at the local level. And starting this fall, the office will reorganize 7 existing state programs, which includes building codes. And then lastly, we have the Governor's Energy Office, which I just described, as well as the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future, where Molly sits. And Molly provided a quick overview on that. So I think we can go on to the next slide. So a little bit about MUBEC. What is it? MUBEC stands for the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. MUBEC is comprised of several codes and standards, specifically from the International Code Council, the ICC, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, or ASHRAE, and the American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM. Within ICC, we have a set of subcodes for a variety of different buildings and sectors, for instance, residential, existing building, mechanical, and energy conservation. Within ASHRAE, we have standards for ventilation and indoor air quality, as well as energy standards. And ASTM, the American Society for Testing and Materials, is the standard practice for radon control throughout the state. MUBEC is governed by the Technical Building Codes and Standards Board. I'm just going to refer to them as the board for the remainder of my portion of the presentation. This is an independent board that has wide representation from multiple sectors throughout the state. We have representation from municipalities above and below a population of 5,000, residential builders, commercial builders, historical preservation, energy efficiency, lumber dealers, architects, and so on. This board analyzes, vets, and discusses the building codes, specifically as they relate to adoption and implementation, and also has several technical advisory groups, also known as tags. These tags dive into specific topic areas within codes to thoroughly go through every portion of them. And there is a voting structure. So this is a process that ensures both reasonability and accountability for building codes throughout the state. MUBEC applies to all buildings constructed or renovated in Maine. The enforcement of MUBEC depends on the population of your municipality. If you are in a municipality with a population of 4,000 or greater, enforcement is required. If you're in a municipality with a population less than 4,000, the enforcement is voluntary. So again, just to repeat that, MUBEC is required for all buildings in the state, but the enforcement depends on the population. It is important to note, just generally, that building codes are the minimum standard to which structures are built and renovated. Within codes, there's a lot of flexibilities and options for pathways to compliance. And a lot of contractors tend to adopt the most recent code MUBEC as the standard of their practice. So always important to talk with your contractor about building codes. Next slide, please. Continuing on with just a little bit of information and overview surrounding MUBEC, I did want to point out 3 pieces of legislation that we have within the state. The first one is the establishment of the Division of Building Codes and Standards. This is essentially the technical support for the board, the Technical Building Codes and Standards Board that I talked about on the previous slide. We also have a piece of legislation regarding the cadence of building code adoption and updates in the state. We are required by law to ensure that both ICC and ASHRAE codes are either the most recent edition or the edition previous to the most recent edition. And for reference, the ICC tends to release codes on a 3-year basis. So for instance, 2015, 2018, 21, 24. So there is, it's not every year that codes are released for adoption. So there is a bit of a gap in between the release of those codes. And then lastly, I did want to highlight the requirement at the bottom for the adoption of a voluntary code. This is a voluntary energy conservation code, essentially showing that energy conservation and energy efficiency are exceeding the established energy code. You'll hear this referred to as the stretch code. Again, this is voluntary, but we are statutorily required to adopt one. There are a couple of municipalities in the state that have opted to adopt the stretch code as their base energy code. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because Greg is going to be diving into this with much more detail, but just wanted to highlight the previous codes that we had and now the current codes that we have. So you can see updates with ICC and ASHRAE, as well as our stretch code. The radon control, that is the ASTM 2008, that standard, to my knowledge, has remained unchanged. Next slide, please. So in general, why are building codes important? Well, first and foremost, you receive greater energy efficiency. There's improved energy efficiency standards that will reduce heating and cooling costs and promote clean energy. Building codes make buildings safer. There's improved structural guidelines that will help protect homes and businesses from natural disasters and just wear and tear over time. There is a higher quality of indoor air quality, better ventilation and radon protection that will improve indoor environments. And also there is the consistency that we have statewide, a uniform code that ensures fairness and clarity for builders, contractors, and homeowners. And there's a lot of benefits that come along with the new codes. For instance, the Department of Energy, in partnership with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, have estimated that a little under $1,000 in energy cost savings in the first year of a structure with the new codes, life cycle cost savings of over $23,000. And the great news is that there is a payback period of less than 5 years for buildings that are built to this standard. And I will note that we do have several trainings that are available. These links, again, will be provided via the slides and posted online. So feel free to look at the trainings that we have throughout the state. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just wanted to offer up a couple of resources that we have both within Greg's office, as well as some materials that have been put together by the Governor's Energy Office. We do also have the Clean Energy Partnership working on clean energy workforce development, and a part of that involves code training. So I wanted to highlight that as well and provide the link to MOCA. Again, it's anticipated in the fall of this year that codes will be transferred from the Department of Public Safety over to MOCA. And last slide. And that's it for my portion. I think I'm right on time. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Greg.
Thanks so much, Ross. I will take my slides down, and then Greg, you can share your slides.
Thank you very much. Give me just one moment here. Okay, and because of the lack of screens, this might get a little jumbled, but I will do the best that I can. Again, my name is Greg Gilbert. I am the new state building official. I've been with the fire marshal's office for about 9 months now. Before that, I I worked for the city of Portland, and that's kind of what got me into this. And now I'm here to help all of you. So we're talking today about the MUBEC update. And Ross mentioned kind of where MUBEC comes from, but to get a little bit more into it, what is included in it. So there are 5 international codes included. They are the 2021 residential code, the commercial building code, the existing building code, the energy conservation code, and the mechanical code. Also included are ASHRAE standards and an ASTM standard. The ASHRAE standards are ventilation standards that help, as I think Ross mentioned a little earlier, to provide fresh, clean air within dwellings and buildings. And then the ASTM standard is the standard for radon control. These are all, all mandatory. They are mandatory across the state, and as was explained, towns and municipalities over 4,000 must adopt into their ordinance some sort of enforcement language. Technically speaking, all towns under 4,000 are still, the contractors are still subject to build to these codes and standards, but those towns are not specifically required to adopt enforcement language. So we'll start off talking about the commercial code, and I will kind of fly through this because, as we said, there's just way too much to really get into the weeds and get into any real depth of updates. So the scope of the IBC, the scope is the only parts I will read out loud, but the provisions of this code shall apply to construction, alterations, relocation, enlargement, replacement, repair, equipment, use and occupancy, location and maintenance, removal and demolition of every building or structure. So that's literally anything that you can think of, right? Any type of construction, any type of modification. Except for, with this code, 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, which is covered by the residential code. So the major updates in the IBC are, we'll start with the definitions. They added some new language about greenhouses, puzzle rooms and play structures, occupied roofs, and owner-occupied lodging houses. So these are all sort of new things that people have had issues with in the past that the development of these codes decided that it was important to add this information. Another new section is for mass timber. In the past, heavy timber was included, but now includes type 4A, 4B, and 4C, which include things like cross-laminated timber and other types of manufactured timber products. Type 4A being the most protected, and type C being the least protected, so protected from fire ratings and things like that. You can see these changes in the allowable stories, heights, and areas tables in Chapter 5 of the IBC, as well as much more in-depth descriptions of what the actual construction types require in Chapter 6. In Chapter 9, we get some new information about fire sprinklers and that they're now required in Group E, which is education occupancies that have fire areas greater than 12,000 square feet, and that have fire areas located on floors other than the level of exit discharge or the first floor, or if you have a ground floor that has an exit. In Chapter 10, we get some updates to the occupant load requirements, specifically for business uses. In the past, business use was just an all around 100 square foot per person. It has been changed now so that the general business use is 150 square feet per person, which lines up with the NFPA codes. And for concentrated business areas, we go down to 50 square feet per person. This is not a major change, but for code enforcement officers out there or folks that use this regularly, the exterior wall ratings table, so this is the table that tells you based on your construction type and use how what type of fire resistive rating you need on the exterior of your building was previously found in section 602 of the commercial code, and it has been moved to chapter 7 and is now table 705.5. All very interesting, I know. We'll move on to existing building codes. So for this, kind of the same deal. The provisions of this code shall apply to repairs, alterations, change of occupancy, addition, and the relocation of existing buildings. So the IBC is for new construction, generally, and this is for existing buildings, except for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, same as the last. So not a whole lot of new information here. With chapter 4, there are updates to the language about repairs, mainly pertaining to the electrical and mechanical repairs for healthcare facilities. This kind of brought it in line with NFPA a little bit. Chapter 5 speaks on the additional language for the requirements of smoke compartments and areas of refuge in I occupancies, as well as updates for other emergency situation systems like the locking arrangements of doors in educational occupancies and the different uses and requirements for two-way communication systems. There's new language regarding the replacement of windows, bars, and grills over windows. We also get into emergency escape and rescue openings, also known as EEROs in chapter 5, and then goes into even more detail in chapter 7. And at this point, I kind of wanted to go over how the IEBC worked a little bit as far as their work classifications are concerned. So you have 3 different classification levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 being the alterations, including removal or replacement of coverings, existing materials, equipment, fixtures, things like windows, doors, wall finishes. Level 2 includes the addition of or elimination of doors, sorry, I guess I mixed those up. Level 2 includes the addition or elimination of doors, windows, reconfiguration of space, things like that, less than 50% of the building. And then level 3 is over 50% of the building or in the work area. When working on level 1 has its own requirements. When working on level 2, you have to follow the requirements of level 1 and level 2. And then when working on a level 3 project, you need to follow the requirements of level 1, level 2, and level 3 projects. So that being said, chapter 7 in the IEBC gets into level 1 alterations. Things like education, occupancy, locking arrangements, and electrical repair requirements that we spoke about from chapter 5 also show up in chapter 7 again. And that's kind of the major changes in chapter 7. Chapter 8, being level 2 alteration, sees the addition of language regarding general system installation, new exceptions regarding existing interior finishes, safety requirements, as well as new requirements for sprinkler systems and in certain occupancies, and modification to type I healthcare occupancies, as mentioned in also mentioned in chapter 5. All of the kind of items that show up in chapters 7 and 8 also show up in chapter 9 with different sections and possibly a little bit more direct information as far as how they relate to these changes and revert back to the IBC. Chapter 10 is for change of use and occupancy in existing buildings. Any work undertaken in connection with a change in use that does not involve a change in occupancy classification or a change in another group. So in the IBC, you have type R, but there are multiple levels of type R being residential construction. So there's, hotel construction or dormitory construction, and they're broken down into different sections. So that's what they're talking about here when you have a change of use that doesn't necessarily mean a change of occupancy or a change of use in a group. These classifications shall conform to the applicable requirements for the work as classified back in chapter 6 of the IEBC and to the requirements of sections 1002 and 1010 within chapter 10. Updates have also been made to the seismic requirements depending on risk categories in chapter 10 as it pertains specifically to utility and storage occupancies. All of that is very exciting, very, very exciting. We'll just jump onto the residential code because I know we've got limited time now, and residential code I think is a little bit pertains to more folks out here. New and updated definitions in the IRC, specifically to the word building. So the word building is now more in-depthly defined. Emergency escape and rescue openings, fire retardant treated wood, has a updated definition. Habitable attics and shipping containers are now discussed in the IRC. Some of you may have seen that some municipalities do try to use shipping containers as either whole dwelling units or parts of dwelling units, or in some cases maybe looking to build larger buildings with them. But those definitions have been added. One of the other additions to the residential code is the addition of radon. Radon control was the standard that we spoke about a little earlier, that ASTM 1465-8 that goes over radon control. Now the IRC, I did a little out of line here, or not out of line, but out of order here, but as we went over scope before, generally the same thing as the IBC, except for this one does pertain specifically to 1 and 2 family houses and townhouses. And I did want to give a quick overview of just a few things that do not require permits. And when it says permits, it really means a building review, because most municipalities will have zoning or land use requirements that do require permits. So I don't want to give you the idea that you don't need to apply for a permit at all. It's just that these don't necessarily require building reviews. So we're talking about storm shelters and the 1-story detached accessory structures, fences not over 7 feet, retaining walls, things like that. And it goes on to prefabricated swimming pools that are less than 24 inches deep. So, you know, if your standard pool or in-ground are still going to require one. Swings and certain playground equipment at a residential level that is not like a public or at a daycare or something like that. This is only for a 1 or 2 family house. And then decks not exceeding 200 square feet that are not 30 inches, that their deck height, the floor height, is not more than 30 inches off the ground. Other updates that we have, aside from the definitions and the radon requirements, in the code it specifies that the majority of walls only require a 1/2 inch of gyp separation between habitable areas, unless you are talking about directly above sleeping areas. The MUBEC board has decided to change that to 5/8 inch type X, which a lot of folks will see in standard fire resistant rated construction, against all walls that are adjacent to habitable spaces. So in the garage, no more 1/2 inch unless it's against a wall that is not up against habitable space. Some more of the updates we have in the IRC deal with the emergency escape and rescue openings, like I had mentioned in the IBC and existing building code. So basements, habitable attics, and every sleeping room shall have not less than 1 operable emergency escape and rescue opening, except where the building is equipped throughout with an approved sprinkler. And I did want to note that even in cases where towns do their own sprinkler reviews, all sprinkler systems and sprinkler modification reviews also need to be submitted to the state fire marshal's office for review and approval before installation. New emergency escape and rescue openings shall have a net clear area of 5.7 square feet. There used to be an exemption for ground floor windows that allowed 5 square feet. And this is again for new windows. That modification to allow 5 square feet is gone. The MUBEC board has removed that, and they felt it was a better option that we stick with the 5.7 due to the fact that the state does not require sprinkler systems in 1 and 2 family houses. Municipalities have the option to adopt language to require them, but the state does not do that right now. And then they get a lot into the replacement of the EEROs in existing residential buildings. They are exempt from meeting that 5.7 square feet that we just talked about as a replacement if it is the manufacturer's largest standard size window that you are replacing with in the same opening that exists. Alterations made in existing buildings shall only require EEROs for new sleeping rooms. So that's if you're altering or doing something to your basement, it does not require an emergency escape and rescue opening unless you are adding sleeping rooms to it. In section 324, there's new language dealing with photovoltaic solar systems that previously did not exist in the residential code, and all of the language was came from the NFPA codes, I believe NFPA 1. The IRC now has this section that goes over all of that, talking about roof loading, and if you have dormers on your roof, what kind of pathways you need to provide, and all that kind of stuff. So that is definitely a good section to look into. Other noteworthy additions to the IRC in this update from the 2015 to the 2021, they now include mezzanines in 1 and 2 family houses. There's language for that. Update to hazardous areas where tempered glass is required. Alternating tread devices and ship's ladder are now allowed in certain situations, and updated language to guardrails. We will jump now to the energy code, everyone's favorite thing to talk about. I know it's mine. We'll talk about the scope first. So in the energy code, you have 2 different provisions. You have the commercial provisions and you have the residential provisions. The commercial provisions apply to all commercial construction and residential construction that is higher than 3 stories. The residential provisions apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings, townhouses, as well as R2, R3, and R4 residential types that are 3 stories or less. So you can have an apartment building that has 200 units in it. As long as it is 3 stories or less, you would use the residential provisions of the energy code for that. If you have a commercial application on the first floor and you have residential for 2 stories above that, those 2 stories would apply the residential provisions and the first floor would apply the commercial provisions. Just a little heads up on that. So our commercial pathways, we have our prescriptive, which is generally the same as the residential prescriptive. You have your pathway is pretty much written out for you in the book. You follow what the book says, you meet all the requirements, and you have met the prescriptive provisions. You also have your UA alternative, which takes the U factors, kind of recalculates them, and allows you to alternate different things or find alternative methods of meeting things. So if you're having a trouble hitting a ceiling insulation requirement, and you can make that up by meeting that with better windows or more insulation in the walls, you have options to kind of play around with the way that the prescriptive method defines how you need to meet compliance. Then you have the total building performance, which establishes criteria for compliance using the different systems and loads throughout the building that you're making to determine the total building's performance through its heating systems, cooling systems, service water heating, fan systems, lighting and power, different things like that. ASHRAE 90.1 is one of the other ASHRAE standards that also allows you or describes to you how to meet compliance for commercial buildings through its standard. And the IECC 2021 specifically allows you to use that, as well as the fact that we have adopted it as a secondary method. Then there's the passive house and DOE zero energy provisions that are 2 other alternative pathways to meet compliance through your commercial construction, commercial energy construction. So some of the updates here are in tables C402.1.3, which is generally your envelope table. It goes through the different types of construction that you could have, whether it's metal construction, frame construction, mass walls with concrete block or something like that, and tells you what insulation requirements there are for those types of construction. And then for C402.4 is similar, but it's for your fenestration. Fenestration being your windows and any doors with, I believe, more than 50% glass or glazing. Also includes skylights and things of that nature. So then we get into the heating and cooling unit capacity and efficiency. So in section C403, there are a plethora of tables that go over the different types of heating and cooling systems, their sizes, their efficiency requirements, and different testing standards. And then in C403.7.4, they've added new information about energy recovery ventilation systems. You may have heard of them referred to as ERVs. These things help with the ventilation within buildings and help to recover, as it says, the energy that goes out. So if you're trying to heat the building and you have to exit some warm air out, this system will help to heat the air that's coming in, but not by mixing it, but through this system, it heats the air that's coming in by using the heat from the air that it's exiting the building with. And then chapter 5 covers existing buildings in energy and changes of use. So the general scope for this is any space that is converted into a dwelling unit. Oh no, sorry, for changes of use. Chapter 5 with the existing buildings covers additions, alterations, repair and modification. And it has specific requirements that are not typically as stringent as that of a new building. And then for changes of use, however, it specifies that there are different methods that you can follow in order to meet the requirements, because it is much more stringent than your standard existing building requirements, but it's still not quite as in-depth as that of a new building for the commercial side. We'll jump to residential pathways. Like I said before, prescriptive method is generally the same as far as you follow what the book has written, and then you have your UA alternative, which allows you to use software like ResNet's ResCheck to kind of swap things around and find the best method for you to meet your compliance goals. Generally speaking, folks will use the table 402.1.3, which gives you, again, as the table we talked about for commercial, your requirements in building envelope and insulation. There are modifications made to this, though, by the UBEC adoption, specifying that, or in the code, it specifies that you need, one of the options is R20 cavity insulation and R5 continuous insulation around the outside of the building. This has been modified so that with the R20, you now are required to use R10 continuous insulation. And with the R13 cavity requirement, that has also been increased from an R10 continuous to an R15 continuous. Getting into the lighting equipment, energy or lighting and power, lighting equipment, all permanently installed lighting fixtures, including kitchen appliance lights, and shall contain high efficacy lighting sources. Also, permanently installed lighting fixtures shall be controlled with either a dimmer and occupant sensor, so a motion sensor or some other type of occupant sensor, or other controls that that is installed or built into the fixture. And it kind of goes into a little bit more detail than that. There are where the total permanently installed exterior lighting power is greater than 30 watts, the permanently installed exterior lighting shall comply with a number of different options, or not options, but requirements, and it gets into more deeper information with those. The residential provisions also have an existing building chapter, chapter 5. Again, the scope of this is to deal with alterations, repairs, additions, and change of use in existing 1 and 2 family townhouses and residential lower or 3 stories or lower. And then with change of occupancies here, it specifies that any space that is converted into a dwelling unit or a portion thereof from another use shall comply with this code. The interpretation for this is that shall comply with the requirements of new construction. That is, though, that only applies to portions of the building that are being worked on. So a portion thereof from another use or occupancy shall does not need to comply with the new code if it's not being messed with effectively. Excuse me. And then we can jump into the stretch codes. So there's a stretch code provision for both the commercial and the residential portions of this. For the residential, for residential projects that do not include fossil fuels of any kind for heating, cooling, hot water, backup heat, or cooking, the total building UA shall exceed the UA requirements by 10% over the code. Otherwise, would be 15% if fossil fuels are included. So this effectively means that the UA that I talked about, you have your R values. Effectively, the inverse of your R value is your U factor. When you use software like the res check that I mentioned before, it will give you a percentage above or passing your compliance requirement, or it won't. It will say that you failed. But when you get above, it'll give you a percentage higher. This is saying that you need to meet that by 15% unless you're not using any fossil fuels, in which point you only need to beat that number by 10%. And generally the same for commercial, except for there is no alternative for the lack of fossil fuel uses. So with the commercial stretch code, those towns or municipalities that are adopting the stretch code when reviewing commercial projects, those projects need to pass using a com check by 15%. And that is regardless of which method you are choosing to use as your pathway. So even if you're using the total building, or if you're using for residential what they call the ERI, which is the energy rating index, you still need to have your envelope meet the UA alternative on a res check or a com check by that 10 or 15% as it applies to the stretch code requirements. And then the last thing I want to talk about is your energy certificate. Your energy certificate is very important, especially for the homeowner. So the contractor needs to put this energy certificate up so that you as a homeowner or as the building official are aware of the types of insulation or fenestration or all the different components to make these buildings meet their energy compliance. So this will give you the information in case modifications are to be made later, or if you need to replace anything, you have all of this information backed up that you know the appropriate things to fix them with. I know that was a bit of a mess, but I appreciate your time, and that's all I have for right now.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was a whirlwind, lots of information, and we've got some excellent questions. So I think we'll just jump in and we'll take some of the questions that we've gotten both online and then through the Q&A, and we'll see how far we get. And if we don't get to your question today, hopefully you'll know where to find more information, and we can go over that right at the end. So first up, I wanted to ask a question that came in about how the codes apply to shared geothermal heating and cooling systems, specifically for multifamily or multiple single-family dwelling units. If you could answer that one.
More or less. So as a renewable energy system, geothermal systems can be used kind of wherever renewable energy systems are required. Generally speaking, things like that aren't that don't have a prescriptive manufacturing or design should be designed by a licensed design professional for whatever application it's being used for. The energy code does get a little bit more into detail with the use of renewable energy systems in the commercial appendix CC and the residential appendix RC. And those are the residential and commercial zero energy appendix.
Great, thanks so much. The next question I'll ask Ross, are there currently any programs to offset costs for upgrades or retrofits to more energy efficient appliances or buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Molly. In terms of programs or anything to offset costs for, I'll speak about non-appliances. We don't have any programs per se, but what I will highlight is on the appliance side, we do have some very great incentives offered by our good friends over at Efficiency Maine. I see some of them are in the crowd today. For reference, the Efficiency Maine Trust is an independent quasi-state agency that implements energy efficiency programs throughout the entire state. You can learn more about them by going to efficiencymaine.com. Some really great incentives for all sectors, residential, commercial, industrial, multifamily, you name it. And we do also have for the builders and the contractors, we do have some really great trainings that are available. I want to highlight again the Clean Energy Partnership. This was established and is a program sitting within the Governor's Energy Office to advance Maine's clean energy, climate, economic development, and workforce goals. Some really great training opportunities that are available through the Clean Energy Partnership. And want to just again highlight that with the new building codes, we are seeing through some analyses through the Department of Energy and PNNL a payback period of less than 5 years. So great programs to help supplement some additional cost. And then also with the new codes, we have higher energy savings and a great payback period.
Thanks, Ross. We've gotten a few questions in about how the codes apply to different types of homes. So for instance, tiny homes, log homes, camps, etc. Greg, would you mind answering that one?
Sure. Give me 1 second. So I think any type of home that is not specifically been removed by like statute would be under the purview of MUBEC. So tiny homes, if they're on a chassis, are considered vehicles, and I believe they'd be reviewed and registered by BMV. Manufactured homes and modular housing have their own rules, and they're presided over by the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. But just to be clear with those only apply to 1 and 2 family homes. So if you're trying to do a modular or manufactured building that's more than 1 or 2 family, that would not apply, and then that would still fall under MUBEC, under the IBC and residential or commercial energy code. Camps are a little difficult because if they meet the requirements of a seasonal dwelling as specified in Chapter 1 of the MUBEC adoption, then they would still need to meet residential construction code, but they wouldn't need to meet energy code. But again, that's only if they meet the requirements of seasonal dwellings. And then for things like log homes, I believe that those are exempted out of statute with things like certain other agricultural buildings and stuff like that that don't necessarily need to meet. That would be in the Title 10 statutes as it pertains to MUBEC. I can look into that and get back to folks, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is.
Great, thank you. Next one, also for Greg, we got a couple of questions about blower door tests. So number 1, when are blower door tests required? And then have the requirements changed to require tighter buildings? And then as a follow-on, how do the codes address air quality with tighter buildings?
Okay, so when blower door tests are required, blower door tests are required pretty much across the board now. with some exemptions here and there, but specifically, if you look at section R402.4.1.2 and the residential provisions, the building or dwelling unit shall be tested for air leakage. Plain and simple. The maximum air leakage rate for any building or dwelling unit under any compliance path shall not exceed, and there's a modification here made by the MUBEC board. The code books will say 5.0 air changes per hour, but the adoption has adopted it at 3.0 air changes per hour. And if you were using the prescriptive code, reading further on in that section, we had already been moved to 3.0 air changes per hour anyway, based on our climate zone. Kind of the same thing in the commercial code. Building thermal envelope shall comply with sections 402.5.1. And then it goes on to specify the building thermal envelope shall be tested in accordance with sections further on. So they have to be tested. And again, I think there's more exemptions or exceptions in the commercial section for different things you can do that might not necessarily require a blower door test, but generally speaking, across the board, they are required. Also specified in the mechanical code and the mechanical sections of the residential code. Once your buildings get to 3.0 or less, mechanical ventilation is required. So that's how we kind of go about maintaining the air quality in such tight buildings. So, as buildings evolve and they're going to get tighter, we've only adopted the 21 code. I know that in the 24 code, that goes down, our climate zone goes down from 3.0 to 2.5. So they are going to continue to get tighter. And as the buildings get tighter with mechanical ventilation is supposed to, the specialists have done the math and done their research, and it will save money by running the mechanical ventilation than it will by having your heating units or cooling units just running nonstop with all of the heat or heat loss that you'd have from these, not as tight buildings and not as insulated buildings. One of the other things that they do with that, these homes, the home ventilation systems, which we said are required at the 3 air changes per hour. They have I already mentioned it a little while ago, energy recovery ventilation systems and heat recovery ventilation systems that assist in the ventilation of the house, but also assist in saving on energy, right? So as I think I mentioned before, as you have air that's being exited, these machines, these systems will heat the air that's coming in with the heated air that's going out, so that you're not losing all of that, energy that you use to heat the air to begin with, and things like that.
All right, thanks so much. We've got time for a few more questions, so I will throw one over to Ross. How can enforcement of building codes be scaled up to ensure that codes are being followed, especially in those smaller towns?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind, I've already talked about it, but the participating in building code trainings throughout the state. Within our clean energy partnership, we have a couple that are scheduled for the remainder of the year, all over the state, whether it's in Millinocket or Bangor, Waterville, Freeport, and likely more coming online as well. Also looking towards the trainings that are offered through Greg's office. Great ways to train up the workforce and to have a trained and educated workforce on the new codes. Also thinking about the small towns, for small towns, considering local ordinances as a way to increase enforcement activities. And I will also say that all of our offices, GoPIF, GEO, and the Fire Marshal's office, and also some of the leadership at MOCA are looking at potential pilots and shared resources that can be considered for small towns. So think about, potentially sharing some folks that can work on code enforcement. So we are looking into some different activities on that front, but the two things that come to my mind are a trained workforce and the consideration of local ordinances.
Great. And folks may already know, if you are in municipal government, that the Community Resilience Partnership, which our office runs, can fund projects to improve code adoption and enforcement in your town. So just another plug for the Community Resilience Partnership. A couple more questions on the town municipal side. One person asks, our town does not currently require occupancy permits. What are the pros and cons of occupancy permits? Greg, is that something that you'd want to weigh in on?
I can weigh in a little bit. I mean, that would generally go to the rest of the fire marshal's office, but it is, occupancy is a big part of building codes as well. So as I understand it, that municipalities over 2,000 are supposed to be issuing occupancy certificates of occupancy. And that, that helps a few ways, especially with things like restaurants and places of assembly, where you might have a larger amount of, people gathering. If sprinklers are required and things like that, people know that, there's a limit to how many people are supposed to be inside or in a specific area. And that's generally what you get with your certificate of occupancy. Same thing with just the structural capacity of buildings, for people to know, what the safe amount of people inside a building or a space is. And then just generally speaking, I know a lot of insurance companies and banks and stuff like that are looking for that based on loans or things of that nature. So.
Great, thanks, Greg. Another question, where can we obtain a hard copy and an online copy of the current codes, specifically the residential code?
Okay, so generally speaking, there is a free version of the digital version that you can just look at codes.iccsafe.org, and then you'll go in and want to put in the year, which is 2001, and search for the code. Also on the Division of Building and Standards website, we do have links to all of the digital versions of the codes and standards. As far as, and I also feel the need to mention that when you go to the site, you have to use the navigation panel on the left, because it does kind of present to you to buy the codes that you're looking at when you first get there. So you use the navigation panel on the left-hand side to actually view the different sections of the code. But that being said, that kind of answers your next question. If you are looking to purchase a copy of any of the codes, generally that they are there when you go to the website to be purchased. For towns that have adopted MUBEC, we will be bringing around some code books, specifically the residential code, to those towns. The state has a building official association that had their conference the last 2 days and started to deliver some of these books there. But over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully not months, but maybe month, we will be getting these out to the municipalities who have adopted.
Wonderful. Thanks, Greg. And just as we wrap up, if folks have more questions, how can they find answers to those questions?
So generally speaking, I absolutely recommend that you speak to your local code enforcement first, because they will know all of your ordinance changes, and just, when it comes down to it, they are the authority, they are the building official, so the final judgment does rest with them. So speak to them first. If there's any further questions beyond that, or if you need to have a conversation with them and someone else, I will do my best. You can send an email to myself or to Shannon Quintel, who is my admin and pretty much the lifeline that I'm hanging on to right now. But yeah, I'm willing to help, but I definitely recommend reaching out to your locals first.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. And thank you, Ross. And thank you all for joining us. It was really great to see all the interest in Maine's new codes, and we hope this was a helpful webinar. So take care, everyone, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.